Welcome to Muslim Apologetics Australia. Let's go ahead and refute this argument once and for all. It's in regards to a Westerner constantly heckling a Muslim or an immigrant regarding assimilation. You must assimilate. If you want to be Australian, if you want to be British, if you want to be American, you must assimilate into our culture. And if you don't, then you're not welcome here. Let's go ahead and bury this argument and show the hypocrisy in its theory. So, when a Westerner, a racist, and an Islamophobe says things like, when you come to Australia, you need to assimilate. You shouldn't change the land. You shouldn't change the culture. It's important to reflect on history and reality, and we're going to do that. Let's be clear about how Australia was changed long before any immigrant arrived here. Number one, Australia was originally inhabited by indigenous peoples for tens of thousands of years, with rich cultures, laws, and spiritual traditions. Number two, British colonisers arrived and imposed their own legal systems, replacing indigenous laws with British law. Number three, they introduced a completely new political system, including parliaments and governance and structures. Number four, they created new settlements and cities, altering the physical landscape and the environment. Number five, they introduced a new flag, new national symbols, and a new identity rooted in British culture. Number six, they introduced churches and Christianity, often forcibly replacing indigenous spiritual practices. Number seven, they established European education systems and cultural norms. Number eight, they brought new languages, customs, and societal structures. Number nine, they imposed economic systems and property laws that erased traditional land ownership and usage by indigenous peoples. Number 10, they engaged in violent colonization, dispossession, and systemic oppression of the original inhabitants. In short, the first settlers didn't assimilate into the land. They imposed their culture, law, religion, and identity onto it. So, why the double standard? When other religions, cultures, and peoples come to Australia today, suddenly people say, don't introduce your culture here, don't change the land, don't enforce your way of life. If it was acceptable for European settlers to come, change the lands, and impose their culture, why is it considered unacceptable for other communities to maintain and express their own cultures today? Why is one standard applied to the original colonizers and another applied to everyone else? It is also incredibly funny and hypocritical. Those who say, do not come to this land and change our culture, are the same people who were advocating for Western liberalism to be enforced in the non-Western world, even in places like Afghanistan, where they tried to change laws, culture, and society to be more liberal, secular, and westernized. Sometimes they even go to those nations and bomb them to pieces in order to westernize those countries. So that is where the double standard and hypocrisy lies. In the end, it's ironic. If they ever happen to move to another country, this is concerning a Westerner, if they happen to move to Dubai, Qatar, if they move to some Asian country, they cling to their own culture, celebrating Christmas, Easter, Australia Day, and all, yet expect everyone else to abandon theirs. And if all of this weren't enough, the irony gets even deeper. The very same people screaming, "We're being invaded, we're being replaced," are the ones cheering on and funding the most active, violent population replacement project on the earth. Billions of Western taxpayer dollars, money that should be helping struggling families in Australia, in America, and Europe, are being poured into Israel to support a foreign state that openly brings European Zionist Jews from England, the US, France, Australia to settle on stolen Palestinian land. They support migrants, their migrants flying halfway across the world to occupy homes that Palestinians have lived in for generations. They support the demolishing of those villages, that the erasure of cultures, the rewriting of demographics, and the ongoing genocide carried out for Greater Israel Project, where the goal is simple: remove the indigenous population and replace them with imported European settlers. But when migrants come to their country peacefully, legally, and with no violence, they suddenly shout replacement and invasion. The hypocrisy is astonishing. And here's the part they will never admit: God's karma is swallowing them whole. While they bankroll displacement and cultural erosion abroad, they are panicking because they believe they're being culturally replaced at home. While they support the expulsion of Palestinians, they are terrified of immigrants moving next door. While they justify genocide for someone else's demographic future, they tremble at the thought of their own declining numbers. It's almost poetic. God truly works in mysterious and sometimes painfully ironic ways. Now, we'll also get into the counter-rebuttal section, because I love counter-rebuttals, because you'll always have some nuisance person come and make this irrelevant comment. So they'll say something like, and the reason why I like to do these counter-rebuttals is to help you engage and how to respond whenever you make an argument. They try and come with a comeback. This is why it's important to do a counter-rebuttal. So some of them write back, they say, without colonization, most of the world would still be living in mud huts without electricity, modern medicine, or even sewage. It's a very typical response. Very typical response. Oh, we can justify our culture of eroding another culture and imposing our culture, because you know what? We can have the privilege to do that because we gave you electricity. Anyway, let's respond. It's interesting how some people want to dismiss history by saying white settlers were allowed to change the culture of this country because they brought progress. This argument is not only ahistorical, it's hypocritical. First, let's address the mud huts claim. Indigenous Australians had complex societies, sustainable agriculture, trade networks, and housing suited to their environment. Many civilizations around the world had sophisticated systems long before colonizers arrived. Colonization didn't create progress out of nothing. It often destroyed existing infrastructure, knowledge, and societies while enriching the colonizers. Using progress to justify dispossession, genocide, and cultural erasure is morally bankrupt. If bringing in progress is the justification for cultural imposition, then by the same logic, other immigrants who have contributed enormously to Australia should also be allowed to influence culture. Italian migrants built industries and communities. Afghan cameliers helped explore and connect remote regions. Indian migrants sustained modern life as doctors, nurses, dentists, tech workers, and more. They have helped maintain the very infrastructure and standard of living that people now claim justify cultural imposition. By the same reasoning, we should also accept Islamic cultures to flourish. Many Islamic communities uphold conservative values, often pushing back against LGBTIQ and transgender agendas that some have introduced into this country. If progress allows one culture to shape society, then why not allow other cultures that contribute to society to also enrich and influence it? For argument's sake, suppose an Indian engineer came to Australia and developed something no one had ever seen before, introducing groundbreaking technology that benefits the whole country. Would you then say he is allowed to bring his Indian culture and influence Australian culture? Or would that be unacceptable? This thought experiment exposes the double standard clearly. White settlers have the privilege to reshape culture under the guise of progress, while other communities are dismissed even when they contribute just much more. The question isn't about technology or progress, it's about fairness, hypocrisy, and who gets to decide whose culture matters. That's the response. Now, another person came back and he wrote, he said, I looked at your page and it's nothing but hate for Israel and the West, so why don't you want to stay in the Middle East? Clearly, at one time you decided that the West is better, so stop trying to change it back to be like the place you left and just stay where you were obviously happy. Unless you are trying to colonize the West, you would not be trying to do that, would you? Typical. Such a typical response. Oh, God. When are these people going to grow up? Let's respond. It's interesting that you assume criticism of Israel or Western policies is hate, and that it somehow means I want to change the West into the Middle East. Criticism is not colonization, it's holding powers accountable. People can live in a country, contribute to it, and still call out injustice. Just because someone criticizes a government, a policy, or societal hypocrisy doesn't mean they want to erase the culture of the country they live in. What's really striking is the hypocrisy. When it comes to the Middle East, you claim to hate the region, to hate Arab and Islamic nations, yet you are actively sending visas, giving permanent residencies, and investing in the settlement of European, American, and Australian Jews in the heart of the Muslim lands. You are literally helping build communities in the very region you claim to despise. You bomb countries, fund settlements, and displace populations, all while claiming moral authority. Funny how that works. By your logic, anyone who points out historical or modern wrongs should just leave the country and never speak up. That's not how justice or progress works. Criticism is not conquest, it's conscience. If advocating for fairness and exposing double standard is colonization, then surely that label is being misused. People can criticize, demand accountability, and fight hypocrisy without wanting to erase a culture. That question is not where someone was born, or which region they prefer. It's whether we are allowed to discuss, debate, and challenge injustice without being accused of colonizing. Now, another person wrote back and he says, all you really said with all those paragraphs is that the West really isn't the place for you. I agree. My response to him, it's funny how you don't say the same about Jews living in Palestine. Since 1948, they've been killing and displacing each other, yet you don't tell them Jews to abandon Israel and go back to Europe, America, Australia, or wherever they come from. Instead, you continue supporting their settlement there. Funny how that works. Another person wrote, the same person wrote, no, they're fine. They're not over here trying to destabilize our countries. So they're talking about the Jews. They're saying, no, they're fine. They're not over here trying to destabilize our countries. They just want to be left alone. We just want to be left alone too. Only you and others like you refuse to leave anyone else alone. My response, they just want to be left alone? Come on. They're kept afloat by milking Western taxpayer dollars, while everyday Westerners are struggling to put food on the table, pay rent, and survive the cost of living crisis. If they really wanted to be left alone, they wouldn't need billions in US and European aid, weapons, and political protection every single year. You tell everyone else to leave people alone, yet your governments can't leave the Middle East alone for 5 bloody minutes. Coups, invasions, sanctions, settlements, the whole package. But suddenly, when people point out the hypocrisy, you act like we're the problem. So let's be honest, they're not left alone, they're just expensive, and Western taxpayers are footing the bill while being told to shut up about it. Another person wrote, and this is about the colonizers, how the colonizers came and they imposed all their culture and so forth. They always try to sort of disconnect with that, to say, oh, that was then, that was barbaric, and that was then, and we disassociate ourselves from that. We disconnect with that, right? This is another angle they try and trick you with. So they'll say, of course that was then, this is now, got to accept the change. Now the Muslims got to accept change or leave, no Sharia law, blah, blah, blah. So I responded and I said, if this is now means we can erase cultures we don't like, then nothing's stopping you from removing all the white colonial structures too, right? Courts, parliaments, the flag, Christianity. Start undoing it. If you expect Muslims to erase their culture, lead by example and erase yours first. Another person wrote, we don't govern by faith here. Radical Muslims govern by faith. The white liberals have already pushed too many Jewish and Christian Democrats away from the Democratic Party. Let's go ahead and respond. You say Muslims govern by faith, but conveniently ignore that Australia's entire legal, political and social system was built on Christian doctrine. British colonisers imposed laws, courts, property rules, education and even social norms, all heavily influenced by Christian teachings, onto Indigenous peoples. That was governing by faith, yet it's somehow acceptable. So if your standard is no faith in government, start with your own colonial legacy before pointing fingers at Muslims. Another person writes, P.S. Most of the colonization you mentioned wasn't. It was outright conquering. That's who decides whose culture matters. Fairness. The universe isn't fair. So this was more of a old school fella. They're more upfront, right? It's unfiltered. So he's basically saying the universe isn't fair. The colonizer, the conqueror, he wins in the end. It's his culture who's dominant. He decides, right? He says the universe isn't fair. Fairness, the universe isn't fair. And my simple response to that is, funny how you defend conquering now. Don't get upset when one day your culture is replaced, eroded, and someone else uses the same excuse back at you. Oh, the universe isn't fair. Deal with it.